Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeodeath.
Hey Archaeodeath fans, and welcome to my latest post by Professor Howard Williams of the University of Chester on my mortuary archaeology interests, and I want to take you on a journey into the world of the walking dead. So I've come out here to a field on a wet and cold day in November, because here I can see in all directions. I can see if any walkers are going to approach. There's a suspicious looking horse over there looking at me, but I don't think it's turned into one of the undead yet. Now, over recent years on my Archaeodeath blog, I have been exploring the archaeology of the walking dead and looking at the many different intersections between our real world, our past, and fictional realms constructed for entertainment purposes. And the zombie folk pop culture has taken on a new level of popularity with this real hit TV show from 2010 from AMC, The Walking Dead, then subsequently Fear the Walking Dead, a spin-off, and now I've just started on The Walking Dead, The World Beyond, the second main spin-off, and all of them come from the Charlie Adlard and Robert Kirkman comic books, which were a hit and very popular and very interesting, and they show us a world of modern day America that's gone over to the walkers, where people who get bitten turn into walkers, and those that don't die naturally will also turn into walkers. Now this horse is approaching me rather suspiciously, so I'm going to check out to make sure it hasn't turned. It's okay. So I look in my blogs at, I started off by reflecting on the fact that in The Walking Dead we're seeing a post-apocalyptic world that's in ruin, and very much like an archaeologist, we explore those ruins through key characters who not only encounter their own world and their own material culture, but they're encountering our world as a world from just before. And we see ruins, we see discard, and we see people making do and adapting to this collapse of society, and making do with different kinds of material culture, creating new kinds of community, many of which harken back to a mixture of imagined pasts from prehistory, from the ancient world, with ideals of democracy and social formations on a simplistic form, but still utilising a civilization as a trope, through to medieval feudal models and frontier models of the American West. And it's that last idea of a return to a horseback riding, a gun wielding society, and America's imaginings of that society that we see most clearly coming through in the later series of the TV show, and that parallels the earlier comic books journey towards the Wild West and the rebuilding of societies and a new frontier. That's in The Walking Dead. Fear the Walking Dead is only for TV. There's no comic books, but they take a more darker and more socially conscious avenue into looking at ethnic conflict, socio-political borders, ethno-linguistic conflicts, and Native American rights, First Nation rights. So you see a different journey, but both shows take a pastiche and a montage of different paths, a bricolage of readaptation in operation by different groups, and we see that taking place. And so in that sense, as an archaeologist, the show is really interesting. It makes us reflect on what makes us human, but also what constitutes our social arrangements, and how we use material culture, from creating communities out of the ruins and the rubble, through to even using junkyards as places where human societies can reform from the ashes of our own world. So check out my blogs, because that's one of the general introductory things, but then I explore the particular mortuary archaeology of how this fictional world reflects on how we deal with the dead, and rather than just how we deal with living people, how we treat other humans, living humans, in relation to the apocalypse that matters. We're shown a society in which how you treat the dead matters, and therefore there's lots of ethical lessons and ethical reflections on what it means to be human. The TV show seems to argue repeatedly, is as much about how we treat the dead, the named dead loved ones, how we treat the anonymous undead, as much as how we treat ourselves. And so there's degrees of what could be called post-humanness about it, where the treatment of the zombies, the Walking Dead, is framed around ethical concerns, even if we don't know their names, even if we don't know their identities. And that very much reflects back on how archaeologists work. Often we're dealing with ancient human remains whose names we do not know, and yet we still abide as much as we can by complex and rigorous ethical considerations of why we do what we do to disturb the dead and to treat the dead. So this opening post is just to introduce you to my blogs, go read them, and to give you a sense of the fact that The Walking Dead may be fiction, but it has many archaeological lessons and has many archaeological themes built into it about how the past is recreated in a imagined future. Material culture, architecture, landscape, but also the treatment of the dead. And in a future video I'll move on and explore some more themes. Now, one case study of looking at the world of the living in The Walking Dead, which I've addressed in a recent publication coming out in the book edited by Kieran Gleave, myself and Pauline Clark, called Public Archaeologies and Frontiers and Borderlands, is looking at the walled communities in The Walking Dead. Now, walls are seductive, they offer us safety, and as a recent book by Laura McAtackney and Randy Maguire explores, they are a fascination and an obsession of our modern world, and that has spilled over into the TV show The Walking Dead, because when the dead start walking the earth, it's to buildings, to the ruins of pre-existing structures and newly built structures to which people turn. So we find in The Walking Dead the idea of the walled community, the defended enclave, the refuge, the fortress, and we encounter both horrific dystopian versions and sort of versions that aspire to retain civilizations, or new versions of social organizations, sort of attempts at utopia. So we have both these dystopian and utopian versions, and we first encounter a dystopia in the form of Woodbury, run by the governor, who rapidly loses an eye and rapidly loses his mind. In fact, he's already lost his mind because he doesn't quite accept that his daughter is dead and keeps her locked in a room and combs her hair and sings to her while she tries to gnaw his ear off. And also he keeps his trophy heads in fish tanks of the people he's slain. And in addition to that sort of seductive, looks like a utopia with a small town southern street, but behind the scenes in the warehouses he's storing up zombies to use as weapons and as entertainment, and the governor is torturing and disposing of without funerary ritual those that turn into the undead. So that's a dystopia, and it's a walled community, and its walls prove to be ultimately about keeping people in rather than trying to wall people out. And the governor has this whole speech to Andrea where he tries to convince her that it's not the walls, because walls can fail, but it's the community within and their aspirations to repopulate the world, to reclaim the world as a civilization, as a renew it in his image, that shows his true megalomania and his narcissism and his evil, if you will, within the TV show's confines. So here, a walled community is an evil community, not because it tries to protect itself, but because of what goes on within the walls. And then we have other examples, deceptive walls. We have the terminus, who are drawing people in with the offer of sanctuary, and those that arrive survive. Well, that proves to be a lie. And then we go on to the saviors, who in this quasi-medieval religious biker group who sort of claim to be the saving people. They're like early medieval warriors and their retinue, with Negan as their sort of semi-religious cult leader, who are trying to establish a sort of protection racket over others, and they have almost a labour camp of docile, servile workers who are living in almost concentration camp conditions in the sanctuary, as they call it. So the uncanny nature of another dystopia meaning this the language of protection, of salvation, of religious and social security is actually hiding a more darker truth. And so it goes on. And then we have the good walled communities. We have Alexandria, we have Hilltop, and we have the Kingdom, where medieval and frontier or colonial architectures are redeployed in this post-apocalyptic world. And then we have those that eschew all borders, all walled communities, and try to go it alone in the wilderness. And that proves to be interesting. Which communities, which individuals do that, who succeeds and who doesn't. And we only encounter one individual who on his own seems to survive for a long time, and that's Eastman in season 6. And we see his backstory. And we have temporary times where individuals go into the wilderness as a moment of mourning from and trauma, from Michonne to Daryl, and in between, of course, Morgan Jones. So we see the wilderness as a place of isolation, and only the very terrifying communities that go back to a savage life, a world of almost animal-like existence, the wolves and then the whisperers, sort of try to live in the post-apocalyptic world without walls. So the TV show puts together a vision, and I talk about this in my paper more, a vision of the future where walls matter and walls work at one level, in the same way that guns work, but only to a degree and within good hands, within a moral context and a social context that's attempting to preserve the past. And it's a mixture of a colonial past, a frontier past, a medieval past that's being evoked. Now, there's more I go into in my publication that's coming out, but that's one example how an archaeologist looking at a TV show can find lots of fictional material elements that are really interesting about how walls are constructed. And of course, another critique point of the whole TV show is that no one ever thinks of digging a ditch, whereas in a real ancient, prehistoric ancient or medieval context, it would be the ditches that would be the defence against enemies, to corral cattle, to protect your crops. And also the ditches would have drained water away, and they would have, been a military, in some cases, defence. And that's true right up to the early 20th century. But we're in a mindset where we can't understand how a ditch could work, but we're happy to believe that a wall would work. And that, my friends, is why we are such a twisted postmodern or late modern society. We don't understand the power of ditches, but we are seduced by the power of walls. That's something for you to think about. So I'll leave you with that. The publication is going to be out very soon, and I hope to explore The Walking Dead and its mortuary practices in future videos. So subscribe to my channel, please, and look at my blogs, and I will come back to this topic, and I shall explore some of the ways in which the dead are treated in The Walking Dead, and what it says about our agendas, our perceptions of death and dying and commemoration, and how it draws on various past motifs we find in the archaeological record.
For relaxing times, make it Archaeodeath time.